The only thing I remember from the accident is the sound of metal screaming. It was a rainy Tuesday in December, and I was driving to do my weekly shopping. David had been begging me to take the bus ever since my glaucoma had worsened, but I refused to listen. I was a perfectly healthy 72-year-old woman, and I'd been driving since my father taught me on the farm when I was 13. David's going to think it was all my fault, but I'll make him read the police report. The other driver ran a red light and T-boned my car. He died instantly, apparently. My car spun off the curb and wrapped around a lamppost. The whole ordeal lasted less than 5 seconds. I woke up in St. Anne's Hospital a day later, after what the doctor called a mild coma. Cuts and bruises covered my body, especially around my eyes, where the airbags had gone off. 2 black eyes and a broken nose made me look like a shriveled peach you'd find at the back of the fridge. Every bone in my body felt disjointed, and I could barely move. After a lively conversation with me, the doctor was greeted by a woman at the door. They shook hands before she limped into the room. She was tall and thin, with an air of faded glamour, tightly curled hair, large gold rings, and a crooked frame draped in a wool shawl. Her smile was kind but strained. "How are you feeling, Maria?" she asked, her voice cracked and gravelly. "Who are you?" I asked. "It's me," she said. "It's..." Each guttural word cut through me. "Your sister," she said. I had never seen this woman in my life. "You must be mistaken," I said. Joan tilted her head to the side, brushing the back of her fingers through my hair. "Oh dear, I think you're the one who's a little confused. You've been through a terrible accident," she said, her words gentle but undermined by the chainsaw rasp of her voice. That's when I noticed the cracks in her glamour. Her eyes were round and bulbous, locked in a perpetual state of alarm. Her loose jaw revealed yellowing bottom teeth. The white powder on her face did little to soften the deep wrinkles in her skin. When she leaned down to kiss my forehead, a damp, swampy stench assaulted my broken nose. "I'm so glad you're okay," she whispered. I raised my arm, sending sharp pain up to my shoulder, and pushed her away. It was an exhausting effort, and as soon as she withdrew, my arm fell back onto the bed while I gasped for air. "I don't have a sister," I said, straining to force the words out. "The man you hit died, you know," she said, adjusting her shawl over her shoulder. The beads around her wrist clattered as she moved. "I want to speak to my son," I said. "David would fix this mess. He was logical like his father. May he rest in peace. David lived in Europe doing something with the internet. I never understood any of it, but it gave my 2 granddaughters a life I could only dream of. We didn't see eye to eye often. I was too emotional, too reckless for David's taste, just like his father. But I needed his clarity now. David's arriving tomorrow, flying in from Zurich just for you," the strange woman said. "I don't want you here," I snapped. "I don't know you." The crooked woman pursed her lips and walked to the bedside table. She picked up a plastic cup and filled it with water. "You're acting like the princess of Apple Tree Castle," she said. How did she know about Apple Tree Castle? That was the nickname I gave the treehouse my father built for my 8th birthday. It was my safe haven, away from the arguments, the corruption, and the chaos of a working farm. He even painted the interior light pink and let me decorate it with old pillows and blankets from the living room. I spent countless summer nights listening to the gentle rustle of the trees. That was until one of my school friends, a girl whose name I can't recall, fell and got badly injured. Her parents were furious and demanded the treehouse be torn down. I had to watch my father dismantle my childhood with every swing of his axe. Now, the woman in my hospital room was telling me that the girl who left a bloodstain in the mud wasn't a forgotten school friend. She was my sister. It was her. She pointed to her drooping chin, tapping it with her finger. "Broke it in 3 places," she said. I closed my eyes, feeling disoriented as my stomach churned, as if I were still spinning in the accident. I'd never had a sister. I had decades of memories to prove it. But how could she know about my secret refuge? Something I hadn't spoken of since I was a child. "I need to eat," I said, opening my eyes. The woman was standing beside me, holding a small teaspoon in her hand, a puzzled expression on her face. In her other hand was an empty yogurt pot. You just ate, darling, she said. I looked at the tray in front of me. An empty chip bag and a few crumbs of bread were all that remained. The sour taste of old yogurt clung to my tongue. You're so forgetful. Just like Mom, she said, carefully placing the spoon and yogurt pot on the tray before moving it to a table cluttered with several other trays. How long have I been here? I asked. She put her hands on her hips. How many times do I have to tell you? A few days, she said. My head throbbed and my jaw ached. And David will be here tomorrow. The crooked woman sat on the couch, far enough that my eyes couldn't quite focus on her. She appeared and disappeared in the shadows. It'll be so wonderful to see him again. The man in the other car. I started trailing off. Yes. Instantly, apparently, the woman said, no pain. Just nothing right away. In a way, it must be nice. The throbbing in my head turned into a sharp, stabbing pain behind my eyes. Darkness crept into my vision, making it seem like I was staring down an endless tunnel. Everything hurt. I wanted to escape this pain, this awful place. I longed for nothingness, but I was trapped here with this woman, my sister. I thought I had been alone for so long, my entire life, but now she was supposedly with me every step of the way. She was meant to understand me better than anyone else. What was Dad's nickname for me? I asked. Minnie. Like the mouse, came her reply. Was that right? I couldn't remember anymore. I'm so tired, I said. Then sleep. Tell me about Mom and Dad, I said, closing my eyes. She started, but it was as if she were describing my parents from an old photograph. Her words were blurred and out of focus with little details that seemed off. She said our father had a bend in his nose, but I had never noticed that. And our mother's part was on the left, not the right, or so I thought. Was that true? Had I just never paid enough attention? Too busy, too wrapped up in my own drama and emotions. She went on to tell stories of our winter getaways, driving up to Scotland in a rundown VW van. Except it wasn't a VW, it was a Ford. I distinctly remembered the little blue logo on the bumper. We went to our favorite campsite in Edinburgh, but I had never been to Edinburgh. Dad used to say it was too expensive, so we always went to Glasgow instead. Our dog, Remy, or was it Timbo, loved sitting with us in the back seat. Her stories were almost true, so close that I wished they were. That I had a sister, that this entire mess made sense. All I remember from the accident is the sound of metal screaming. I woke up in nothingness. Was that what the other driver felt as his face went through the windshield? But the dim green glow of the fire alarm pulled me back to my hospital room. Dark shapes began to form as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. The stories had stopped, replaced by something more sinister. Slow, gurgling breaths came from the shadows, like the choking engine of a stalled van. In the corner of the room, near the couch, I could make out a blurry figure standing in the shadows. It didn't move, its head turned toward me. You're not my sister, are you? I murmured. The smell of stagnant water and mud wafted from the darkness, but the figure remained still. I am now. I threw off the blanket, smacking my aching hand against the cords attached to my arm, yanking them out. I had to leave, escape the darkness. The machine let out a shrill digital wail. Its screen flickered to life, casting jagged shadows across the floor in front of me and barely illuminating the door on the other side of the room. The shadows rippled around me. Were they from the screen or the crooked woman approaching me? I dropped my bare feet onto the cold tiles, barely able to steady myself. My vision blurred, and the sharp pain behind my eyes returned. I thought I might vomit, but instead, I took my first step forward. Then a second. Slowly but surely, I made my way toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. "Don't," came a gurgling whisper. A dark blur moved at the corner of my vision. A hand extended. I felt a damp touch graze my left shoulder. Cracks and pops erupted in my chest as my breathing grew labored. It became thick and wet, my voice rasping as I struggled toward the door. Felt like I was drowning in my own bile. I fell to my knees. My body betrayed me. I spat onto the floor and tried to keep moving, but I collapsed after only a few seconds. A cold, clammy sensation crept over my body as something whispered in my ear. "Shoo, it's okay. You're here now." I woke up back in the hospital bed. The light was blinding, and sharp pains shot through my head once again. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut and focused on my labored breathing. I touched my face and felt the warm plastic of an oxygen mask. I was safe. After a few seconds, my breathing steadied, but the pain and ringing persisted. I opened my eyes and saw David sitting in a chair near the door, speaking furiously on his phone. He hadn't noticed I was awake. I looked around the room. It was just him. A warm glow of relief washed over me, a sense of joy I hadn't felt in so long. David glanced at me and realized I was awake. He smiled. Then the door opened. A crooked arm slid in first, followed by the rest of her. The woman who claimed to be my sister surveyed the room with a warm smile. I clutched my oxygen mask tightly as my lungs constricted. I pointed a trembling finger at her, trying to scream through my short, raspy breaths. My ears roared. David stood up and approached the woman. He shook his head, seemingly shouting. Was he telling her off? He didn't know who she was either? The woman shouted back, her voice harsh and broken. For a brief moment, I thought she was just a deranged stranger, a disturbed woman who had found her way into my room. At least that would make sense. But then David collapsed into her arms. His shoulders shook as he sobbed. She rubbed his back gently, her bulging eyes locked onto mine. Her lips curled into a tender smile. I ripped off the oxygen mask, trying desperately to scream, but only rough, gurgling sounds came out. David rushed over, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked at me with genuine concern, deep sorrow in his eyes, as he gripped my shoulders firmly. "Shoo, it's okay. You're here now," he said softly. I stared into his large, brown eyes. It was then that I remembered. My son's eyes were green.